So welcome to my second installment of my weekend project. If you all remember last week, what I started working on was my motorized antenna mount. And last week what I just simply did was I went through and I tested my stepper motors that I bought from years back using the drivers that I bought from Texas Instrument and my Arduino. In this week's installment, what I'm going to do is see if I can control the stepper motors. So I'm going to try to make them turn at in quarter degree increments. So in other words, 90 degrees, then 180, 270, and then back to 360, which would be 0, of course. And also what I want to do is I want to see if I can control the speed at which these stepper motors turn. So I'm going to do a second experiment where I have the stepper motor turning at some speed predetermined. I just don't know what or I should say I have not determined that yet, but I'll figure it out as we go along, and I will let you know at what speed we're going to turn the stepper motor. So come right back after this message and we'll get around to starting both of those projects.
Alright, so before I start doing anything new this week, I want to go back and make sure everything still works as it did last week. And the reason why I want to do that is because before I start making any changes, if I was to, let's say something was wrong with the circuitry, then I would know something is wrong. Whereas if I started making changes and then something was wrong from last week, I don't know whether what I did this week is a problem or what I did last week or something may have messed up since last week. So because of that, we're going to start with just making sure everything still works as it did last week. Now, if you remember from last week, we had the potentiometer that's up here at the top, and when we turn the potentiometer, the stepper motor would turn in one direction. When we turn the opposite direction, it would turn the stepper motor would turn the opposite direction. So I'm going to go ahead and just double check, make sure all of that is still working as it did last week. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my power on. Now you won't be able to see this from the screen here. But just remember last week we did that. So the stepper motor is in one direction. As you can see, the motor is going in one direction, and then as I turn it the opposite direction, now the stepper motor is going the opposite direction. So it appears that everything is still working as it did from last week. Alright, so now that we have this, let's go ahead and start changing the program and setting it up and seeing what happened this week.
Alright, so let's take a look at the program that we're going to use in order to control the speed of our stepper motor and to make it go clockwise and counterclockwise. So this is a program I downloaded directly from the Arduino website. Apparently it was written by Tom Ego, I guess that's pronounced. And so in this program, what happens here is first you have to tell the stepper motor how many steps per revolution your motor has. And so for my motor, it's 400 steps per revolution. And then same from last week, we're using the we're initializing the stepper library, letting it know that our stepper motor is connected to, or more specifically, our driver is connected to pin numbers 8 through 11 on the Arduino. And then as we scroll down here, we see that what we can set up here is the RPMs of the stepper motor, so in other words the rotations per minute, so in other words the speed. And then they have a part in the program here, or Tom has a part in the program here, where he's just talking to or initializing the serial port so that he can send information back to the laptop or computer. And then from there, this is the meat, if you will, of the program. And so the first part is going to cause the stepper motor to rotate 1 revolution clockwise, and then take I believe that's a ½ second delay, and then it'll start rotating counterclockwise, then another ½ second delay, and it will continue back and forth between the two. In other words, it just continue looping between the two. And so that's the program that we're going to use. And so let's go ahead now and save this. And once we've saved it, then we can upload it to the Arduino. So now it's compiling.
All right, so let's see if the program that we downloaded, or I downloaded, works. Remember, according to the program, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to go clockwise, 1 revolution in approximately 1 second, or pardon me, 60 seconds. And then it's going to go counterclockwise in approximately 60 seconds. So let's see if that's what turns out to be the case here. And it looks to be about right. Okay, so it looks to be about right. It started going clockwise first, and it went approximately 1 full revolution in what appears to be about 60 seconds. And then it went counterclockwise in approximately 60 seconds. So at least for this portion, we can say it seems like we've had some level of success here. We'll see what happens with the other portion.
Now what we're going to do is we're going to turn our motor clockwise in 90-degree increments. And so in this program here, we have to include the stepper library. Then we indicate to the stepper motor, or to the Arduino, that our motor actually has 400 steps per revolution. Then we're, same as before, we indicate which pins are being used to drive the stepper motor. And then from there, rather than doing 60 RPMs like I did before, I'm going to do 30 RPMs this time. And as you know, if we divide 400 by 4, because there's 4 90-degree turns in 360, then we end up with 100 steps for each 90-degree turn. And so if I put 100 in here, 100 in here, 100 in here, 100 in here, we should make 1 full revolution. And then of course we're taking a delay after each quarter turn of approximately ½ second is what this is saying, and it will just continue to repeat over and over. Alright, so again, we're going to save this, and we're going to download this, or upload this, pardon me, onto our Arduino.
Alright, so now that we've got the program for the quarter turns put onto or loaded up into our Arduino, let's see what happens here. Alright. One, 2, 3, 4. All right, it looks like we have some sort of an issue because it's taking more than 4 turns in order to make 1 complete revolution. Let's check again. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 before it gets back to the original location. So that seems to indicate that something is wrong here in terms of the number of revolutions, or the amount of the resolution actually of the motor. Let's try something a little bit different and see what happens.
Alright, so as you saw in the previous segment there, we had some issues with the rotating of the motor. So let's go ahead and try something different, see if this makes things a little bit better, a little bit worse. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually increasing the amount of steps for each quarter turn. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I don't know if you noticed, but in the last video, it seemed like the motor wasn't making the full 90-degree turn. So I'm just throwing a number in there and I'm just going to see what happens. So let's go ahead now and save this. And then we're going to upload it to the Arduino and then see what works out from here.
Alright, now that we made the change, let's see if that made any difference. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the stepper motor here. It seems to be going a little bit over. So it appears that we need to make some adjustments, or we need to figure out why the amount of resolution, or the resolution for the stepper motor, isn't matching what we have. That probably will be a project or something that we'll continue next week. So come back next week, let's see what happens. Hopefully I get it figured out. This is just what happens when you're working on electronics. That's why it's good to always test this stuff, because sometimes when you expect something to work one way, it doesn't end up working the way that you expect it to. Let me turn that off. It doesn't end up working the way that you expect it to. So sometimes you have to make adjustments, or you have to figure out what went wrong. And that's what we're going to do next week. We're going to figure out what went wrong, and we're going to come back and we're going to try this again.